When I was a college student, I remember sharing my faith with someone, and we were talking about God, and this person said, I don't think I can believe in a God that asks a father to give up his son. And obviously, this person was referencing Abraham and his son Isaac, and that's in Genesis chapter 22. And I remember in my young zeal really trying to explain, the reasons why God had reason to do that, and I forget everything that I said. But it is true that for much of my life, I viewed this story as definitely a hard one to embrace, but also one where I kind of imagined Abraham going up the mountain with his son. I just imagine him trembling. I imagine him struggling to just go, okay, I got to do the right thing. God asked me to do this. I got to do the right thing. And obviously it's inspiring, right? In this idea of being able to sacrifice everything for God. I think it's an important point. And as I've read this, though, I read this just recently and started trying to look into the text in Genesis chapter 22 and ask myself, like, what was he feeling? And what's crazy is you read, you don't see any sadness in Abraham. At least it's not mentioned. It's not quoted. And if you're not careful as you read this, I know I've read in the past, I've almost felt like Abraham has been lying to his son in this passage. In verse 5, it looks like he lies to his servants. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you. He knows that he's about to go sacrifice his son. So is he lying to his servants to try and avoid a scene? In verse 8, after his son asks, where's the lamb? Abraham says, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the two of them went together. Abraham is supposed to be the father of faith. How can he be the father of faith if he's through this huge story of faith? He's lying to his servants, to his son. It just feels like a massive betrayal of trust. Which is why I'm so grateful in Hebrews chapter 11, the writer gives us some context to this story. He actually goes on to say that Abraham embraced the promises of God and believed that God had the power to raise his son from the dead. And when I read that, and as I started reading it, this week and the last couple of weeks, it started to make sense to me. Why he was able to say that, why there was no sadness in his, in this process. I believe that Abraham didn't believe that God was like this either. Just like this person that I shared my faith with, when I was a student. Actually, this person had reason. God wasn't going to do it. See, Abraham realized even if God makes me sacrifice my son, he already promised that I would be a father of many nations. And so he's not going to go back on his promises. So I believe that he is going to take care of me. I believe that he's going to take care of my son. His faith was so strong, I wonder if he was even sad at all in the process. Because he believed the words that he said to his servant, that we will come back. That that he will provide a lamb. And that's exactly what happens at the end of the story. An angel comes and stops him and says, don't do it. And a lamb presents itself just nearby that they sacrifice. They come down from the mountain, two of them, father and son. And it ends with this really incredible blessing that God doubles down on his promise that he gave him already. In verse 15, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sands on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me. God was so moved by Abraham's faith. Other nations actually did sacrifice their children, but Abraham knew that this God was different, that this God would never demand that, the innocence of his young boy. I believe that Abraham realized that God was bigger, that his promises would never be null and void, that God was going to keep his word. What we see here about God is that God really, he does want us to view him as number one. God desires deep commitment. And the reality is he deserves our love, a love that surpasses all other relationships. Jesus himself said it. In Matthew 10, he says in verse 37, anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. God is a God that really wants absolute engagement, absolute commitment. That's real love. Obviously, no husband would say to his wife, I love you second. I love you a little bit more than this other woman. No, real love is I love you more than anything. And that's what God wants from us, because he's our Father and he desires that type of obedience and sacrifice and commitment. But the amazing thing about this God is that he comes with incredible blessings when we decide to obey. God was so moved by Abraham's faith and by that which led to Abraham's obedience. I think that's why Abraham wasn't sad, because he knew who God was, that God keeps his promises. And so I think he knew, just like this person I spoke to, that God would never ask something of that. Never to give up physically, but emotionally, to put our family, anyone on above God. He understood that God was looking for absolute loyalty and commitment. What's amazing is that what God doesn't ask us to do, as far as giving up our son or our family physically, he did himself with putting his son on the cross. He did this to help us see that's why he deserves our obedience. That's why he deserves our sacrifice and our commitment, because he's a God that goes even farther in showing his love for us than we ever could. So we've got to get all people off of the altar in the sense of putting them above God. And with that, God blesses us. We got to give up our life to save it. And through that faith, the blessings follow. I was inspired by that. I hope it inspires you to remember who the real God is.